All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining and welcome to today's webinar, Fostering Strong Partnerships to Expand Access to Meals. Before I jump in, I just do want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded and I will get that started. And some brief housekeeping as we get started. This is a webinar, so you are in listen-only mode without access to video or sound. However, if you need to reach us or contact us, you are welcome to use the chat function. And you can also share questions at any time using the Q&A function. So as we're able, we may be able to answer questions throughout the webinar, and we'll get to audience Q&A at the end. So, introductions. My name is Carolyn Vega, and I'm a senior manager for Share Our Strengths No Kid Hungry campaign, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's webinar with three amazing representatives from summer and after school meal sponsoring organizations. First, we have Krista Bauer, who is the Child Nutrition Program Director for Youth Prize. Youth Prize is a nonprofit based in Minneapolis, Minnesota that is committed to promoting equity for Minnesota's Indigenous, low-income, and racially diverse youth. We also have Patrick Doyle with us. He's the Chief Operating Officer for the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Capital Area, which serves youth through its clubhouses and a variety of programs in Albany, New York, and the surrounding areas. And we also have Larry Caro, who is the Chief Executive Officer of UMC Food. UMC Food is a ministry of the Northern Kentucky District of the Kentucky Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. And although based in Northern Kentucky, UMC Food sponsors summer and after school meals programs in both Kentucky and Ohio. So great perspective as a multi-state sponsor here. And so for our agenda today, I am going to start off by going over the waivers that are available for this summer. I know this webinar doesn't exactly apply to any one child nutrition program, but I imagine that many of you are going to be operating a summer meals program or supporting a summer meals program in some way. And since these waivers are very timely and critical to operations this summer, I do just want to take a few minutes going over what those are. Then we will dive into hearing from our wonderful panelists. We'll do a panel Q&A, and we'll talk a little bit about pre-pandemic partnerships as well as partnerships during COVID response, because we know many of them have been strengthened, some may be new, some may have evolved. And they'll also share some of their general partnership tips. And then again, as I mentioned, we'll have audience Q&A at the end. So please drop your questions in the Q&A box at any time so that we can get started with those right away. So the waiver overview. USDA announced several weeks ago at this point that they were extending several summer meals program waivers through this summer. So I think the four core waivers that have really allowed for altered operations during COVID response are the congregate meal service waiver, the meal service time waiver, the parent or guardian meal pickup waiver, and the area eligibility waiver. So taken together, these waivers are what allow you to do grab and go meals, to do meal delivery, to do mobile meals deliveries that, cover meals for up to a week at a time, things like that. And then the area eligibility waiver just gives you so much more flexibility on where you're able to operate. Although, as I'm sure you all know by now, check with your state agency, since sometimes that's administered a little bit differently from state to state. There's also the meal pattern waiver, but this one is very important to note that the meal pattern waiver for the summer food service program is still only available through June 30th. However, if you are a school district operating through the seamless summer option, you do have the meal pattern waiver available through September 30th. So important to make sure that is part of your planning as you do all of your purchasing and menu planning. And then we also have some of the waivers that were associated with that memo rescission, if you remember that from a few years ago now. So there's on-site monitoring, the first week site visit waiver for returning sites, offer versus serve for non-school SFSP sponsors, and the ability to use area eligibility for closed enrolled SFSP and SSO sites. And a new waiver that was just announced recently is a waiver to allow sponsors that operated in summer 2019 to apply and operate as experienced sponsors this summer, even if they did not operate last summer. So get a little bit of a break on the application process if you did not operate last summer, but you have operated successfully in the past. So that was it. If you have any questions about the waivers, we have some resources that we can share. But I do want to get into this panel Q&A. So I am actually going to stop sharing and have us just go on video. And so I want to get started just hearing about all of your organizations and your usual operations before COVID, so everyone can get a little bit more familiar. So Patrick, why don't we get started with you if you want to tell us a little bit about, how many sites you used to have before COVID and the kinds of partners that you used to have before COVID.
Yeah, thanks again for having me today. So yeah, pre-pandemic, our Boys and Girls Club started a food service program about 4 years ago. We started vending. We had about 12 locations, so we were relatively small to a lot of our other champions that are on this call, serving right around 600 to 800 meals a day throughout the area. Some of our partners were, we had a YMCA, but mostly Boys and Girls Clubs were our primary focus. So, we served our Boys and Girls Club locations and a couple daycares at that time.
Okay, great. And Larry, do you want to give us some background on your operations, number of sites, and again, the kinds of partners that you had?
Well, UMC Food being part of the United Methodist Church, one of our primary partners is our local church, where we're able to go into many local churches and retrofit their kitchens, use 1 hour a week to a commercial kitchen. And because we're part of the Methodist Church, they're part of the Methodist Church, they see it as a ministry and outreach. We're able to do that in a very cost-effective manner. Pre-pandemic, we served Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati, and we partnered with every Boys and Girls Club, every Cincinnati Public Library, every Cincinnati YMCA, because they cover both states. We partnered with multiple school districts who we served their after school and their summer programs, and of course many community centers such as municipal rec centers and pools. We would go into the pools and provide meals to the kids that were there. So that's what it looked like for us. Pre-pandemic, we had over 400 sites in 2018.
Wow. Thank you. So yeah, two very different perspectives already, from the Boys and Girls Club doing their own operations to a large sponsor working with Boys and Girls Clubs. So for a third perspective, Krista, do you want to take it and talk about what your operations and partnerships looked like pre-COVID?
Yes, I think I fall somewhere right in between both of you. So Youth Prize also started in 2015 as an unaffiliated sponsor in Minnesota. And we really started with just 10 locations for both CACFP and SFSP. And over the next 4 years, we doubled each year as far as locations, as far as meal numbers. So that really kept growing for us rather abruptly. So we had to learn rather quickly for our operations. But a lot of our sites were libraries, rec centers, community centers, places of worship, and charter schools. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that we really became a primary sponsor for all of the YMCAs in our metro area, as well as small to medium-sized youth serving organizations that otherwise didn't have access to regular meals.
Awesome. All right. And COVID, we know it has just dominated life for the past year plus. And I think a big piece of how people have responded to COVID has been through partnerships. So Larry, why don't we start with you on this question? If you just want to talk about how partnerships and operations have changed for you over this past year.
Well, when COVID started and the bottom started to fall out of our communities, UMC Food was committed that we would bend over backwards to make sure that none of the kids that we were serving missed a meal. For example, before the waivers came out allowing summer food service, we had kids that were going to the YMCA's and the Boys and Girls Clubs for their child care because their parents still had to work, but the summer food service waivers weren't out. You couldn't serve the at-risk after-school program in the day programs. And so UMC Food strengthened that relationship by saying, we don't care where the money is going to come from. Every child got fed every single day, and there wasn't a single day that was missed that a child missed food, whether it be in any of our 70 daycare centers or the YMCA's or the Boys and Girls Clubs. And that did, our commitment to our partners in that way showed that, we're not all about the money. And I think because of our partnership with the Methodist Church, I was not concerned about where that money was coming from. I could pick up the phone call in a heartbeat and say, we need to feed these kids. We didn't have to because the waivers came out and the waivers were retroactive. But I think the whole attitude there that UMC Food have is we're going to feed your children because that's what we're about. And I think our philosophy is that we're not necessarily a child feeding organization. We are, but our philosophy and our mission is to support our partners as they carry out their mission to serve the spiritual, emotional, academic, social, physical needs of their children so that they don't have to worry about food and they can focus on those 5 areas. We are like the oil in the engine that helps our YMCA's and Boys and Girls Clubs and all of the others function. And when we have that attitude, we will do what it takes, and that only strengthen our partnerships. And where we are at this point is that our numbers went down. I think the last I looked, we only had 170 sites because we weren't serving schools. This whole duplication of services is probably what brought our numbers down more, site numbers down more than anything. But right now we're getting phone calls from school food authorities saying we're exhausted. We don't want to serve during the summer. Can you pick it up? Or we're exhausted. We're going to serve only until summer school stops on June 20th. Can you please come in and feed? And of course, UMC Food, because of our attitude, because of our nimbleness, is saying we're right there. So that's how we're customer service. We're supporting our partners. We're not necessarily out to just feed kids.
That's great. And I know you've told me in the past that I know you said some of your school sites have dropped off, but can you talk a little bit how you have continued working with at least some schools over the past year or two?
Well, what we have done with the schools in our area is we have emailed them and communicated with them and said, when are you providing meals? Monday through Friday? Okay, we'll come in and partner with you. We'll provide meals for your kids on Saturdays and Sundays. So many of our boxes right now contain 7 days of CACFP at-risk meals, plus 2 days of summer food service meals. If they didn't serve during spring break, we went in with a 7-day CACFP and 7 days summer. So they got 28 meals for that particular week. So we didn't step on our school food authorities partners' toes. And there are some areas that we just pulled out because the school was serving both at-risk and summer. And we gladly bowed out and said, you'll be back. And they are. They're coming back. We had one school system that said, we're so rural, we have transportation issues. So one rural school system, we went out this last summer and delivered to 2,000 kids every week a 7-day summer food service box to their homes. Our partnership with the state agency is crucial. I've been dealing with Kentucky, and they've asked us to look at going into counties in Kentucky where there are no at-risk and summer sites. And I've created this map. I was just working on that today. And there are dozens of counties in Kentucky that don't have any out-of-school food service. And they've asked us as their partner to say, we're one of the largest. Can you go in and serve these areas that aren't being served?
That's great. I feel like state agencies don't often get mentioned as partners, but it's always amazing when they can truly be partners. That's great.
Kentucky is very much a partner for us, and they act like that.
That's great. Well, let's turn to Krista now. And if you want to tell us how things have changed for you and who your partners have become during COVID response.
Yeah, how haven't things changed? So we're a community organization, and so in our state, there was a little bit of a delay once COVID hit. So all of our operations really shut down in March, like middle of March, we were done. All of our sites were done, and we had about a 2-week window to really flip the switch on what we were doing, to figure out what the new operations were going to look like, and to find partners that still wanted to operate or could operate at a capacity that we knew was going to be much larger than what they previously had held for us. And luckily, we work with third-party vendors for our food, and we had fantastic vendors on our side that were ready to find whatever possibilities they could to make sure the food showed up. So for us, we went from 80 locations that we were used to serving so regularly to 13 that we right off the bat we knew we could operate, and that gradually moved up to about 40, which is where we're at right about now. But our biggest partners throughout all of this have actually been like our local government agencies, working with our counties, working with them in coordination with rec centers, with even the school districts, of being like, okay, you're going to serve this, this, and this. I'm going to serve this and this, and like dedicating a calendar to really broadcast that information has been so integral in us having the successes that we've had. When the schools are shut down, we already knew about it a month in advance, and we had food ready to go. So there was never a major gap in our areas, especially in the metro. And we're traditionally in about 5 counties, like the Twin Cities metro. We cover about 5 of those counties. And that started to grow, where we were getting requests from all over Minnesota of how can you come do that in our communities. And it was really just working with the county agencies of just, okay, what does this town need? What does this city need? Okay, how can we, where are the gaps? How can we work with your school districts to really make sure that we aren't stepping on toes, but rather we're all benefiting, we're all using our strengths and our services to the best capacity. Luckily, we already have an infrastructure that's pretty digital. We don't do a lot of paper transfer. We don't do a lot of printing. So for all of our sites to really flip over to a COVID protocol came rather quickly, and they were ready to go right away. And I think that really worked in our favor. But it was definitely a stressful scenario, because now we have these COVID protocols. Now we have all of these bulk meals. How are we going to store them? And because of like the city of St. Paul that we work really close with right now, and St. Paul Public Schools, because of that collaboration, that's the biggest area that we're able to get food out, where we're getting thousands of meals out a day. And it's not even a question. It's just breathing at this point. And it's because we were able to get coolers and storage and materials ready, with all of us working together, so that every site could just be pushing. And there's no one that comes into those lines that's walking away without food, which has really been the goal this whole time, is if you're in line, there's food for you. And it is ready. You don't have to wait too long, which has been great.
That's awesome. I am curious about those local government agency and county partnerships. Who found each other first? Did they reach out to you for that support? How did that relationship get built?
You know, we've always had a really strong relationship with our St. Paul Parks and Recs department since the beginning of us becoming a sponsor. And they were kind of struggling in a space of like, okay, well, how do we keep doing food? Can food still happen? And I was like, yeah, of course it can. And then the St. Paul mayor and his office reached out and was like, we want to do more. And I was like, you can't say no. You can't turn that back and be like, no, it's okay. They reach out, and we tell them the structure, we tell them the needs, and they were integral in really helping us find additional funding to cover additional equipment that was going to come out of that. In our state, we didn't always have access to all the meal pattern waivers. So when milk had to be required, some places are going home with a gallon of milk because they have to have enough to cover an entire week. And luckily, with working with the county agencies, we found the funds to do that. We found that the agencies that we needed to get us those coolers, to get us that storage. But we really lucked out in that space, where it was the mayor and his team being like, let's go. What do we need to do? Tell us what to do, and we'll put you on whatever we can. And I was like, okay, this is what I need. And they really helped skyrocket that procedure for us.
That's amazing. Always great to find those champions, or for them to find you, as the case may be. Um, Great. Well, turning to Patrick, why don't you tell us about how things changed for you and how your partnerships changed during COVID response?
Yeah, so Boys and Girls Clubs in our area, we have about 25 locations for after school programming. So when the pandemic hit and a lot of the schools shut down, it meant that, maybe we didn't have jobs available for our staff. So we shifted focus into food service. We wanted to give back to the community. And while we couldn't have a lot of kids in our programming, what can we do to benefit the community? So again, like Larry said, before the waivers were even out, we're calling our funders, our partners, to see how can we secure funding to make it happen. And like I said before, at our high point, we were about 800 meals a day before COVID, to almost 4,000 meals. So again, like Kristen and Larry said, it's finding a way to transport, to keep everything safe. One fortunate thing we had was we had staff. We had availability. We didn't, during COVID, when there was no work, people were being laid off. And we said as an organization that would not happen for us. So we kept everyone employed, but it's reshifted. It was great to see our staff members up in the kitchen, helping out at sites. And one of our largest partnerships during that time came with the housing locations. So our school districts would have pick up at the schools, and a lot of our parents in our communities that we serve, they might not have transportation, or they're at work during the times, where they couldn't obtain the food. So we utilized the waivers to go right into where the kids were. So again, like I said before, we had about eight locations before COVID, to over 30 locations and have the capacity. So like we said, you can't have duplicated services. So we worked with the school districts as well, which was something new for us this year during COVID, and continue to look to hopefully work with them moving forward.
That's great. Thank you so much. So as we look to the summer, as staff are getting tired and burnt out, but we still face another summer of disrupted operations, I would just love to know if at all your partnerships and operations are going to change yet again, and if so, how. So for this, Krista, why don't we kick it off with you talking about this summer and any changes you may be making?
I feel like it's always a jinx when I say like we have a pretty good understanding from last summer of what to expect this summer, because no year has been the same since we started. This is our 6th summer operating, but for us, really, it's going to be expanding the partnerships. Those aren't going anywhere, which has been really great. And our additional vendors that we've been able to find have actually increased our capacity of service area. So where we traditionally are the metro, this summer we're really looking at actually serving the majority of the west side of the Minnesota border, and tackling more of the areas that are traditionally underserved because of logistics, and we were able to kind of fill that gap. So with those partnerships, it's really helped us kind of initiate, like, yeah, we can be responsive in this, we can be ready for it. But I would say this summer, we are expecting to go back to high numbers for sites. I don't see us really cutting numbers as far as service, because our collaborations with the school districts are still going to be there. Our collaborations with the local government agencies are still going to be there. So the curbside bundles that we've been doing are still going very strong. But we have more sites like our YMCAs that are going to be coming back, that feel more confident coming back, to start having more regular programming again. And their number of sites have almost tripled for this summer. So we see that more people are feeling more confident and more capable of doing this work. So we're really excited for this summer. And one way that we're prepping for that is really bringing in 3 additional interns, some additional staff that can help us manage all of this new logistics that we haven't experienced before. But we have great vendors on our side. We have great partners that are established and understand the menus and understand the waivers. So it makes it a little easier for us when we're like, okay, we need to change to this specific menu for this community because of the ethnicities and the diversities of that space. Like, this is what we want to make sure that we cover. And I feel like we're really set up nicely for that. But like I said, I don't want to jinx it, but I feel confident going into this summer, much better than I did last year. I feel like last year I was waiting by a hair of just stress. And this year, even my team is like, we can breathe a little. Okay. I have one team member that's on vacation right now. And I was like, take that vacation, take the vacation, take the break. I need you ready for summer. So I'm definitely encouraging space away as much as possible. But we've been really lucky with our partners that want to continue doing this work, and the school districts that want to continue navigating those gaps in those spaces, because we're just supporting each other. We're making sure that there are no gaps and that we all are working to our own strengths, which has been really wonderful.
That's great. And glad you're taking care of your staff so you're ready for whatever comes next, which hopefully is what we expect. Patrick, why don't we go to you next with how you see things playing out this summer and any new or different partnerships?
Yeah, so I think building off of last summer, we filled in the gaps with the school districts as a lot of our staff were overworked. We are looking to work with a couple school districts, so their second year doing this. One good thing is we actually hire some of their staffing as well. So staff, so it's not, the school district, might not have the possibilities of doing it all, but, some of the staff that aren't burnt out, that want to continue employment, we actually take them on to help us with the service. Because again, we went from a few hundred to a few thousand meals within our service for last summer. And again, this summer, we're going to be right in the middle,
Ooh, Patrick, you're breaking up a little
now. But like Krista said,
you were breaking up a little. So whatever was your last point, if you wouldn't mind trying to repeat it, and we'll see if we can get it in.
Come back.
Ooh,
Sure.
quite.
Of course, they're fixing our internet today in our organization.
Now you're back.
Yeah, what I said was we are looking. Great. Sorry about that. Murphy's Law. Our internet was, we had somebody here today working on it. It was supposed to be top notch. So, but yeah, like I said, this year we are looking to continue our working relationship with the housing with school districts. Because as a Boys and Girls Space and food access is one of the gaps that need to continue to be filled.
Great, thank you. All right, and Larry, I know you mentioned briefly about schools reaching out to you, but if you want to elaborate on that or with anything else happening this summer for you in terms of partnerships changes.
Well, I think that what we are anticipating is that the traditional camps, places where kids go to during the summer, which weren't really in operation last year, are going to come back. So those locations might have been meal pickup, non-congregate meal pickup last year. That won't be the case this year. So I think that a lot of our partners that didn't serve in person last summer will be serving in person all of our YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs, which means for us then the number of meals we anticipate will be dropping, because we were giving out 7-day pandemic boxes once a week. And now we're going to be delivering hot meals to them, one per child that's only enrolled there. So I think our numbers are going to drop. We did about 4 million meals last year. So this summer, I think those numbers will drop. I think that we will be picking up again with pandemic boxes to school systems. And I think that we have gotten a couple of school systems to call us and say, we know you're in our area, we're tired. When summer school is over, can you feed our kids? So I think those will increase. And we have gotten one government agency that provides recreation for their communities have called us, which will result in additional 30 sites this summer to feed their children again in person. So we're seeing a dramatic increase of in-person meals, and I think we will see a lowering of the pandemic boxes, or maybe staying the same with some of these schools coming on that we didn't do last year.
Yeah, interesting. I I guess it's just another thing to navigate and plan for. That it's amazing that kids are going to be able to have those enrichment activities and camps and be able to enjoy the summer a bit more than they could last year, but it's definitely an operational shift. But great to have partners to help navigate all of that. So I'd love to just get into how to maintain these strong partnerships. You've given so many great examples of the different kinds of organizations you've worked with and how that's changed and evolved. But I know that managing relationships can be tough. Starting relationships can be tough. So Patrick, why don't we start with you if you just have any of that general advice for how to make all of this work? And you are on mute.
All right, we'll go back to this.
There we go.
All right, sorry about that. I was trying to do it on my phone, but I guess it wasn't working. Yeah, I just think going into it, trying to be as stress-free as possible, continue to build on the relationships that we've built on throughout the past year, especially. Like I said, working with our government officials for hopefully a seamless with paperwork. Again, one thing that's new for our organization is our audits. So from us going from a small to a larger. So that's something that we are working on right now as far as our organization. So it's a little bit different. But I just think continuing the positive, just trying to be as positive as we can during this time will help everyone out.
Yes, no one wants to work with a negative partner. Larry, why don't we go to you next with your general tips and advice for maintaining strong partners?
What has worked well for us is our attitude, our philosophy, our willingness to go above and beyond. We are unapologetically a faith-based organization, and we're unapologetically a Christian organization. But we have been very intentional about being inclusive. Thus, UMC Food, part of the Methodist Church, has partnerships with schools, government agencies, and while it is certainly permissible under both programs to give a child a hot dog and say, Jesus loves you, here's your hot dog paid by the federal government, there's nothing wrong with that. We let our partners promote that as they see fit. Our tagline is making God's love edible. We were very intentional in developing our logo with our partners that we would not offend anybody. Our philosophy is we don't serve any pork in any of our programs, so as not to offend anybody that may be coming into it. We're truly multi-faith, no faith. We're here to serve our partners. I think our philosophy of we will do what it takes. For example, if Vacation Bible School comes to us and says, hey, I see your menu that the snack for Vacation Bible School is goldfish and milk, but we're doing fruits of the spirit. We will go out to the grocery store and for 5 days for Vacation Bible School, we'll get them strawberries on Monday and grapes on Tuesday. We will do what it takes to get them fruits of the spirit. Our menus now include meatless, vegetarian options, which we've developed to support our partners. So it's customer service. We increase by word of mouth and reputation. We don't go out and get anybody. We've got people knocking on our door to say, please take us on as a sponsor. And I think the best thing that we've navigated our partnership with the state agencies so that if they have a need, they're not afraid to come to UMC Food and say, you know what, here's a map of Kentucky, here's where we have no, and there was a time that they would push back and say, that VCA, viable accountability and capability, they don't have those questions about UMC Food. Thus, they're asking us to consider going 200 miles away and operating site. So that's our philosophy, and that's how we support and nurture our partnerships.
That's great. That attention to customer service definitely goes a very long way. Krista, why don't you take it away with your partnership tips?
Yes. our biggest thing is we've always really illustrated for regardless of what type of organization that we work with, that this program isn't necessarily a one size fits all. We know the parameters, we know the compliance layout, and we know that every location that we partner with is going to look a little different. Their space is going to be different, their capacities are going to be different. And so we really tried to make sure that we integrate their strengths into the operation and that we open up that door, that it is accessible. This program, yes, it's free meals, but we really try to just say like these are meals without borders. Just come get the meals. Like we have them ready, we have them prepared. And that's really opened up with some of our other larger partners. We've been really lucky that in the last couple of years, as a community organization, we're now very trusted by our state of how we distribute, how we manage, how we follow their protocols. And sometimes we even get to share our opinions and be heard, and that's fantastic. But it really just comes down to us being willing to see the strengths in each one and saying like, okay, we're really good at the communication and getting the materials out there into the public. You're really good at recruitment and sending the people this way because of where they're coming, and we really try to make sure that we navigate that space cautiously and intentionally, so that we don't duplicate anything that other partners are doing, but that also it's constantly a refresh of, does this system still work for you? I would say that every year we've updated our operations just a little bit, just to make it a little more accessible for sites that are really small to even sites that are serving 400 meals a day. It's really dependent on what their operation structure looks like. And that's been something that's been really helpful for us in making sure that everyone feels welcome into this program. If they're in that eligible space, if they're in a community that needs that meal service, of not us saying like, this is the meal you have to have, this is how you have to track it. We say like, these are our options, which pathway do you want to take, and let's talk through that. And for our bigger partnerships like the cities and the counties and with the state even, it's really just being very clear with what our needs are and where our gaps are, and to say like, okay, now how do we work together? How can we collectively do this? We've been really lucky in the last couple of years that even with Second Harvest Heartland, which is our local food service or food pantry place, they serve such a large area in our jurisdictions, and they've been so helpful in coordinating other sponsors together. They've been so helpful in making sure that all of us kind of are on the same page and share operations or dynamics. And that's really helped us to make sure that we're all on the same page, especially through this pandemic. Knowing like, what's your capability? Okay, who needs to take a break? Okay, let's fill in those gaps. But that's been a really big thing for us, is just really knowing the strengths and abilities of each place, and just understanding this program has stipulations and compliance, but it's not a one size fits all, and we have to figure out how to make it accessible to every site that we really want to work with, and with every partner that we want to work with. How I work with libraries is not the same way I work with rec centers. They have a slightly different structure, so we have to be able to kind of mold that to better operate with them, and reach the communities that they still are serving. So that's been a really big thing for us.
That's great. Well, you're definitely speaking my language, since I work for an organization called Share Our Strength, to say you're focused on meeting everyone where they are and maximizing their strengths as well as your own strengths. I also love the idea of being partners instead of competitors with other sponsors, since the goal is to feed kids at the end of the day. So that's really great, and glad you have other partners in the state working on that with you. So at this time, I would love for all of you attendees to drop in questions to the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you and have these wonderful panelists address any partnership challenges or questions that you're having. And also, if you just want to share partnership examples that maybe we haven't covered in the chat, welcome you to drop that in, and we're happy to share that out so that everyone can also learn from you and your experience. While we wait for questions to come in, I think, Krista, building on something you just said of, you work with libraries differently from how you work with rec centers. I know schools are often a difficult point for a lot of nonprofits, where they're not sure how to reach out, how to start that relationship. So maybe I'll start with you, since you mentioned a little bit of this working differently with folks, but also would love to also hear from Patrick and Larry on this point of just how you start a relationship with a school and maintain a relationship with a school.
Yeah, really just that introduction of, okay, this is what I'm doing. I think we were really upfront right off the bat with all of our school agencies of, we're here to partner with you. We aren't trying to take anything. So how can we best serve this space? And being really intentional with that conversation first. I think especially in our state, like it's schools come first. If a site has an interest in this program, they go to the school first, and then if that doesn't work, or if there's no coverage, or if there is no school district that's doing this program, then they can come to community organizations. And so that was the other part of, like, if it's outside your capacity, or if it's not in your realm or your jurisdiction, like, please consider us, because we do have more mobility, we do have more of a range, we can fill in those odd spaces that might be outside of your space. Or maybe they have a menu request, or a type of a menu that they need that the school isn't able to do. We can come in and help and support with that space. I think for us, what's really worked has really just been being very honest. Like, we aren't trying to take anything. We only want to support the work, and we want to make sure that regardless of where any of these kids live, that if they need this food, like, that we get it to them, and that it becomes available regardless. That's really been my stepping off point with a lot of my schools.
Thank you for that. Larry or Patrick, if you want to jump in next. Larry, why don't you go ahead?
Our relationship with schools started through third-party agencies, the YMCA's in the 21st century clubs that were held in schools. They had been looking for food before we came in, and the schools weren't really, the school will give them an NSLP snack, but the kids were there till 6 o'clock at night. And so we developed a relationship. First with the Boys and Girls Club was the first relationship that we developed. And for the first year or so, I think all we were doing in schools were the 21st century childcares afterwards. But then schools started looking at us, and it was a challenge when we would go to a school and say, hey, can we serve more of your kids? Being a faith-based organization was strike one. Being an outside organization was strike two. Bringing food into their facility was strike three. So they called the state agency and said, are these people legit? Can we let somebody else's food come into our facility? Can we let them use, fill in the blank? And so it was a rough few years to get started. But at this point, these superintendents talk to each other. You mentioned UMC food in Ohio and Kentucky, and there's probably nobody that doesn't know about UMC food. And so we've got street cred, so to speak. It took a while, especially being a faith-based organization. Can we let Jesus come into the schools? And finally, they determined that, that may be our ultimate goal, but we're going to show Jesus by loving you and taking care of your needs.
That's great. Being patient and that letting word of mouth do some of the work too. I think that's great advice. So Patrick, anything you want to add, especially I think since you've really strengthened those relationships over the past year?
Yeah, I think just to piggyback off what Krista and Larry said is, being open, communication is definitely key. And, to reiterate that, we aren't the first step. The school districts have the first right for food service, but, we have flexibility, like Krista said, where we could take van loads of food to places that they can't, or after school, after their staff work long 8-hour days, 9-hour days, and you have the after school component, for CACFP during a typical school year, how it's sometimes it's easier, for an organization to pick up those ability. So yes, I think working with our local school district, it's just been definitely open communication, and like I always say, if the school district could serve 100% of the need, then there's no need for me to to make something happen, or to feed more meals. So I think it's just the partnership. Together, we could actually achieve more. So.
Great. Thank you. Well, we got a tough question that came in, so we'll see if any of you have good advice. How do you respond to tense situations with a site partner since everyone reaches COVID burnout at some point? So yeah, I'm sure there have been tough situations that you've probably seen or know from your site monitors and whatnot. So any advice or stories that you could share, I think would be much appreciated. Krista, thanks. Why don't you start off?
Yeah, no, sorry. We have extreme weather warning. So if you hear the thing in the background, there's no storm. They're just testing alarms. They actually just hit it off a second ago, so that was perfect timing. For us, the tent situations definitely occurred. We experienced a lot of tent situations after the murder of George Floyd last summer. So we kind of had an influx of stress and burnout very quickly right after we switched to pandemic mode. And it really came down to relying even more on our partnerships of like, okay, this site is having a really hard time. We need to shut them down or we need to pause them, and figuring out with our other local partners of how can we support that. There were a couple of sites that we just had to stop food for a week, that there was no way to find something to fill in right away. We did find ways to do that on the fly, but that it does happen. You do have a lot of staff, and whether it's illness or whether it is just the true burnout, you have to respect that space, because we have to be able to continue to do the work. The people at the sites have to be able to continue to do the work. And so when the burnout hits, like, it's a real situation. We have been lucky to have a lot of volunteer interest, and that's been a space that we've relied on really heavily lately, of like, okay, this site needs to shut down, or like their staff needs to step away. What volunteers can we get in there to help service this today? And like, what staff member can we send to oversee so that we still follow the compliance and regulations? So we really try to have that line B option of, let's send volunteers or send other organizations that have been interested in supporting this. Let's send them there and have them help with that. And there's usually a maintenance person that meets us at those sites. But it's just been, when they say there's burnout, we say, okay, what can we do and how can we support you? And try to give them that space to take a minute to breathe and process.
Thanks.
For us, during the pandemic, we had a lot of tense situations, but quite frankly, most of them were caused by us as the sponsor. Finding help when all of the stimulus and unemployment went into effect, and people were making more money sitting at home than they could ever make coming and working for entry-level wages for a job like ours, was difficult. And then what happened was, in a span of 2 days, we have 8 central kitchens, because we do all of our own meal prep too. We don't bend it out, we do it all ourselves. In a span of 2 days, 3 of our kitchens had to shut down for 2 weeks immediately, no drawdown. 3 weeks they had to shut, 2 weeks they had to shut down, which means that there is no way, because of the large geographic area that we cover, and just simply the amount of food that we were sending out to our partners that were operating in person, like the Boys and Girls Club of YMCA. And the way we diffused this is, because it was health department order, there was not much we could do. We immediately reached out to all of our partners and said, we can't feed you, but you go out and get what you need to feed your kids. And we want you to try and meet the meal pattern. If you don't, we don't care. Send us the receipts. We're going to reimburse you every penny for everything that you put out. And then we had people, some of our daycares call and say, well, we're not going to Costco. And I said, well, go ahead and order DoorDash for your little kiddos. We will pay for it. So again, it's that customer service. Did that cost us a fortune? You betcha. But it diffused the situation. It's doing what it takes at all costs, because our goal is to support our partners, and they're not going to be able to do anything. They can't feed their little 3-year-olds in the daycare centers. They're not going to be able to do anything in the after-school Boys and Girls Clubs if their kids are hungry. And we said, do what you need to do. We'll pay for it. A lot of pizza was ordered that 2-week period, and we paid a lot of money for pizza from, Domino's and wherever.
That's tough, but you really went above and beyond to make sure that even if it wasn't through the federal nutrition programs, the kids got fed. So, Patrick, do you have any stories to share on this one, or insights?
Yeah, so like I said before, we were fortunate because we decided as an organization we were employing all of our staff. So we had the ability to actually have our staff go to the sites. So we had staff at every single site. Like Larry said, from an organization standpoint, it might have cost us more dollars for operation than we're typically used to, but it also was to showcase to our staff that we were there. We're there for the staff, the staff needs. So I think that's where, we didn't have as many hiccups throughout this summer as we had in the past, with paperwork. It was because our staff were there to assure that the paperwork was done correctly, which is always our number one with, vending is the paperwork done? And that's where, it's like, I don't know why we needed so much paperwork. It's, so this summer, we were very fortunate because we had our staff members at each site.
Yeah, that's great. And as Krista said too, making sure you're taking care of your staff can go a long way to helping with those situations too. So maybe only one side is burnt out, but at least your staff have something to give in those tough situations. That's great. We had a question come in about whether any of you are anticipating a drop in numbers due to pandemic EBT. I'm not sure how many of you may be following this. I know states are all in different places with their pandemic EBT plans too, but if any of you have thoughts to share on this one, Larry, if you want to start off, go ahead.
The pandemic EBT is lumped into all the other stimulus that's flooding our country right now with the tax returns, the stimulus money, the pandemic EBT. And I was just on a phone call with the City of Cincinnati Food Insecurity Network for Children. And everybody from the food stores, Free Store Food Bank is seeing a dramatic drop because of the flood of money into our families. And I think that February, March, and April, we're seeing that drop. We expect once those funds are expended at the family level, that our numbers will increase. But put EBT with everything else, and it's just stimulus overload for folks that aren't used to having these kind of resources. So yeah, the numbers have dropped.
Krista or Patrick, any extra thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Krista.
Oh, I was gonna say, we saw a bit of a drop as well, but it happened at the same time that more of our programs were able to open up. So we actually saw people moving from bundles to dailies, and that caused a reduction in meals as well. Just because now they were only serving those really that were coming into programming versus doing a curbside distribution. But for a lot of our larger sites that stayed with the strong bundles and they're still serving at their highest capacity. So we haven't really seen that drop. So it's kind of been a hit or miss in the community organization side. We haven't seen a huge reduction in that space, but we did see it just because programs were opening up a little bit more.
Yeah, we've also seen a small drop every time the stimulus comes out, and it's kind of a good sign because maybe parents, it allows them to have a little bit more flexibility, different meal quality, cooking home style meals, so we take it as hey, it's a good sign. And then well, like Larry said, we every time we see a decrease of 10%, but then we'd see the increase on a month later or so. To help meet the need again.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Patrick. I think it is important to note that it's a critical lifeline, especially if there were families that weren't able to take advantage of the meals before, that they're able to get that support. And good to know that you're all there for them when those funds are expended. And I do also want to note that families can still come and pick up meal bundles, even if they are receiving PEBT. So that's also an important thing to make sure families do know that they're not going to get in trouble for that, and it can help them stretch their food budget further, or, to Patrick's point, be able to purchase more healthy foods than they might otherwise if they're able to take advantage of both and really stretch their resources like that. We had a question come in about staffing. As many of you have alluded to, any ideas on how to get new employees to come in and fill spots? I know this is a question I actually put out to all of you today separately. It's a problem we've been hearing just so much across the board. So if any of you have things you want to share about how you're finding staff or dealing with staffing situations right now, I think would be very helpful.
I guess I can go first on this one.
Yeah.
We did, so our food service staff members, so as we transitioned and started opening back up at our locations, we did lose a lot of our full-time staff members. back to their original site director jobs, running Boys and Girls Clubs. So we did have to, we've had ups and downs with hiring, but we've been doing onboarding, and we did increase the starting salaries of all of our food service positions throughout the year. We've added bonuses, so bonus structures, for staff members. So as they're onboarded, they actually, say, oh, hey, if you make every single day for the next 2 months, we're actually gonna give you a bonus. If you do this, we'll, and so I think it's just, a lot of just taking care of your staff, like you said. During the pandemic, we had weekly luncheons. So every Friday we had, staff meals at the end of the day together, and we talk about, what was going on. Again, because we didn't know, we started last March thinking, hey, we're gonna do this for the next month. And here we are 13 months later, still doing it. So those staff lunches did end, when around October-ish, because again, everyone started going back to their original jobs, which is great, and great news because it's showing that we're opening back up the doors, having more kids in our program, that parents need us because, the jobs, they're going back to their jobs. Ellie. So if anyone does find the way to hire staff at a more efficient way, we would like to know as well.
I'm sure people will be reassured that they're not the only ones struggling. But Larry, if you want to weigh in with staffing ideas.
We struggled and struggled and struggled, and our entry level is $11 or $12 an hour, and we were getting nobody. And so we played around with a bonus structure, and we told our folks that we will give you a $5 an hour bonus, and that will get them to wear Amazon. So we were now competing with Amazon, which helped. But we started out by paying that bonus monthly, and said, we're structuring this bonus not so that you actually, it's an entitlement. We created with lawyers wording that it's not an entitlement, can go away at any time. But what we wanted to combat the entry level folks that didn't worry about calling off sick, or, I stubbed my toe, or I'm just tired, or being late. If we schedule at 8 o'clock, a lot of our people say, hey, as long as I saunter in by 8:30 in the morning, I'm good. And so what we did was we patterned that $5 bonus and said, if you're late, we're going to give you a corrective action plan. It's going to cost you $1 an hour for a month. If you call off and you don't have a good excuse, it's going to cost you $1 an hour. And so we actually had some people quit because they lost their whole bonus. Now, it was fine that they were working for the base pay before. And so it caused more problems by waiting a month. So we switched it to a weekly bonus. And I think we found our sweet spot. So they're paid weekly with their paycheck. So if they get a corrective action plan for being late, they'll lose $1 an hour, but they'll lose it for 4 pay periods. That's less painful. It's more immediate gratification, immediate reward for making it the previous week. You also have to be here to get that bonus. So if you quit in the middle of a week, you're not getting the bonus for that week. You have to be employed when we process payroll. So it helped with retention. And I think that people quitting has deteriorated or dissipated big time. Now, I know this question was from a school food authority. You got way more regulations than we do. That would take an active board of education. We're more nimble. I don't know what to tell school food authorities, but we found our sweet spot at $16, $17 an hour for our frontline hourly people. We found our sweet spot by rewarding behavior that they should learn to do anyway. If you say you're going to work and you show up on time, most people don't have that work ethic, not for frontline staff, but we're gradually helping them develop that work ethic. And it's rewarded us. And I think it's going to be a long-term reward for them too, the employees. Not financially, but they're developing habits that are going to serve them well in the long run.
Yeah, I know it is a lot more difficult for school food authorities that can't just offer bonuses and increased pay like that at the drop of a hat. I guess nothing else, if you're really struggling for the summer, you could turn to a more nimble nonprofit partner to help potentially. Krista, do you have anything you want to weigh in with on the staffing briefly?
For us, we primarily use the site staff for each of our locations to actually help serve and distribute meals. So we found ways to incentivize or to support them, whether that was through regularly making sure that they had food available, or other items available to them. Our personal staff that we have, so usually my team is a team of 3 during the school year, and it jumps to 6 to 7 during the summer. And we just increased our hourly wage of, okay, if you're working with us in these times, this is what you get paid. So right now during the summer, they get paid at least $18 an hour because there's a lot of traveling, there's potential, pandemic exposure stuff that they have to be aware of. So we really try to kind of match up to that element. But a lot of our site staff really stepped in, or volunteers, and we really try to support them and make sure that they always have materials and items available at each of our locations as well, that they aren't by any means left out, so they still have access to something, and that seemed to really help.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, we are now at 3 o'clock. So thank you so much to everyone who chatted in questions. It was so great to see that engagement. And just thank you especially to Krista, Patrick, and Larry for sharing your experience, sharing your struggles, and also all of this great partnership examples and advice. It's been so valuable. So sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions and thoughts. My email address, as well as our general best practices at Share Our Strength email address, is up there. So if you have a question for me or one of our panelists, you can send that to us and we can get it to them. And I also have our website there with more information. So thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye, everyone.